Now, Hamas again broke the ransom deal, where Israel has agreed to exchange hostages for murderers held in Israeli prisons. Hamas did not release German Israeli civilian hostage Arbel Yehud as the deal required, and Hamas did not reveal which hostages are alive as the deal required. And that's why Israel is not allowing Gazans to return to the northern part of the Strip. Hamas violated its commitment. An Israeli Prime Minister's office has confirmed that Israel won't allow Gazans to cross into the northern Gaza Strip until the release of civilian Arbel Yehud. Israel did, however, let go 200 terrorists, half of which were serving life sentences for murder. 114 terrorists were released to the West Bank, 16 terrorists were released to the Gaza Strip, and another 70 terrorists were released into Egypt. Israel's military said it is determined to bring home Arbel Yehud as well as Shiri Bibas and her two young children, Kfir and Ariel. So when you see Gazans being turned back from northern Gaza, remember this. Hamas is again playing games to retain power at the expense of civilians. Arbel and the Bibas family are still in Hamas terror dungeons, and we still don't even know who is alive. Israel made a deal with the devil, and the devil, frankly, is not keeping up its side of the bargain. Are you surprised? Turning stateside now, and US President Donald Trump has said that Arab states should let millions of Gazans enter their countries. Trump said Gazans could maybe live in peace for a change if Egypt and Jordan built them housing. And he wants Egypt and Jordan to let Gazans escape Hamas's Gaza. Trump suggested a plan to, in his words, just clean out the Gaza Strip. This is the big picture. Hamas exists for the sake of waging war on Israel until Israel is destroyed. There will be war in Gaza as long as Hamas has power in Gaza, and Hamas's strategy is to make war on Israeli people from behind Gazans. We know Hamas fights from hospitals and schools and hides hostages in UN shelters. And Hamas thinks it wins when Gazan civilians die. Organizations like UNRWA help Hamas to control Gazans, and countries like Egypt, which isn't letting Gazans cross its border with Gaza, help Hamas control Gazans. So if you care about Gazans and you want to end the war, you should be calling for a government in Gaza that makes peace with Israel. Right now, Gaza has a government that wants war. All right, let's take some questions from our audience watching live on social media.
Thank you, Asher. The most common question I'm seeing right now is from Lebanon. There's a lot of breaking news out of Lebanon, reports that more than 10 people were killed in southern Lebanon, clashes between the IDF and the Lebanese army, perhaps, civilians involved. What are you hearing so far, and what can you tell us about Lebanon?
All right, thank you so much for this question. And frankly, I will say at the start, this is a fast developing story, and I am waiting here live for updates. But here is what I know for the time being and what information and context I can provide. On November 27th, 2024, the governments of Israel and Lebanon agreed to a 60-day ceasefire. Really, it was with Hezbollah, but for the moment, we will say it was between Israel and Lebanon. Now, the Israeli military was meant to withdraw from southern Lebanon, and the Lebanese military was meant to deploy into southern Lebanon and to disarm Hezbollah. But we're now 60 days after that 60-day ceasefire came into effect, and yet Hezbollah remains armed and in control of southern Lebanon. That's a violation of the ceasefire. Hezbollah cannot be armed. Hezbollah must disarm, and the Lebanese army has not deployed in southern Lebanon in a manner sufficient to prevent Hezbollah from operating in this region. So that's why the Israeli military is still there in southern Lebanon. And even the Trump administration has called on Israel to stay in southern Lebanon past this 60-day deadline, with the White House spokesman saying a ceasefire extension was needed to support Lebanon's new president and ensure the return of Israelis who had previously fled the country's north and are only just now trying to come back to their lives and homes in that area. As for what's happening now, well, Hezbollah wants to retake southern Lebanon. It wants the IDF to leave, and it wants to rebuild its own military bases in the region. Hezbollah has sent civilians marching with Hezbollah flags into areas of southern Lebanon that are Israeli closed military zones. Closed because Israel is not going to allow Hezbollah to regroup in these regions. There are reports that the IDF opened fire, but the IDF has not yet commented, and that is all the information I can give on that part. But the bottom line is that the Lebanese government must take responsibility for all of Lebanon and make peace with Israel. We need peace, not a temporary ceasefire deal.
Our next question is from Instagram Stories. What do you make of the reports that President Trump has released the hold on a shipment of 2,000-pound bombs?
This is an important development that we're seeing right here, and important for a number of reasons. I'll break that down for you. I mean, firstly, the change that we're seeing is in line with the change of administration. The Biden administration was hesitant to release this particular category of weaponry to Israel after there were accusations that it may be used to willy-nilly target Gazan civilians, which of course was never the aim and intention and misrepresents Israel and its goals. These bombs are critical for Israel to have, firstly, because the Israeli military has requested in line with their strategic interests, but secondly, because Israel is fighting a seven-front war. This is not simply about Gaza. This is about what's happening currently, as we're seeing right now, with Hezbollah in Lebanon. This is, of course, about what we saw in the past and what may see again is still an ongoing threat from the Houthi pirates in Yemen. And critically, the puppet master of them all, Iran, ensuring that Israel has the capacity to strike Iran should it need to, with all the weaponry available, and to prevent and dissuade the Iranians from taking the sort of actions that they have attempted in the past with mass ballistic missile firings at Israel, as we have seen now multiple times. These bombs are critical for Israel to operate, and it is critical for the world to show the enemies of Israel, the axis of resistance, as they call themselves, and any other militant groups that may have interests in the region, that Israel and the US are aligned in their interests, will continue to be so, both militarily, strategically, diplomatically, and of course, in line with liberal values for peace, security, and democracy that Israel and the US both fight for at all times. And that's a lot of what is being represented here.
Our next question is about the Gaza Strip. What is the significance of the Netzarim corridor? We see that one of Hamas's key demands is to let people in southern Gaza return to areas in northern Gaza that they evacuated in the beginning of the war. Why is this so important to Hamas?
To understand the Netzarim corridor, it's important for us to understand the geography of Gaza. Gaza, as is often known, the Gaza Strip is a long, thin strip that has been bisected by the Netzarim corridor from north to south, which is a key strategic operating region for Israel and the IDF at the moment, has throughout the last almost 16 months now of war. What we've seen there is the north, which was an area where so much of the militant Hamas military action was taking place from at the start of the war and in the days and months after October 7th. Israel pushed Hamas and unfortunately the civilians that were caught up in the crossfire back through the Netzarim corridor to the south in order to take control of that area and prevent the sort of strikes that we were seeing, endless rocket fire that was coming from the Gaza Strip, from that region, that key operating region. The Netzarim corridor is part of that, and that is what Hamas is pushing to get reopened so that civilians, yes, but also Hamas militants can then flood back to the north and recapture and reclaim much of that territory for their own military interests. Israel will not allow Hamas to do that, particularly for the moment when Hamas is continuing to violate the ceasefire terms and deals. Arbel Yehud, a civilian who was supposed to be returned already, was supposed to be returned last week, has not been returned yet. It was supposed to be returned last Saturday. Until we have seen her return, until we have an understanding of who is alive and who is dead of the remaining 90 hostages that Hamas holds, Israel will not abide Hamas reclaiming that part of the north, re-threatening Israelis, re-threatening the Israeli people from these regions where they wish to operate, without them keeping their end of the bargain. We are dealing with the devil here, people. It is critical for us to make sure that we give no headway, no leeway for this sort of game playing when it comes to people's lives. Both Gazans and Israelis' civilian lives are at stake, and the IDF will not allow that to occur.
What was your reaction yesterday as you watched the 4 Israeli soldiers be released in Gaza?
That's an important question, and I thank you for asking. I mean, frankly, barely had time to take a breath. I personally spent all of yesterday ensuring that our Israeli citizen spokespeople were out there speaking across the globe in global media and ensuring that the message that we're putting forth here, the many messages we're putting forth here of the need to return hostages back from Gaza, the need to move from a ceasefire deal to a sustainable peace that ensures that Hamas is not in power and are disarmed. And of course, a similar situation for Hezbollah in the north of the country, that we see some sort of stability return to this region that has seen nothing but tumult since October 7th when Hamas perpetrated their heinous atrocities. I mean, that's all I was thinking about yesterday. That's all I was doing. Such joy in my heart to see the return of the 4 women we had returned yesterday, but still so much sadness, so much heaviness for the 90 that still remain in captivity. And we must never forget that these hostages are still there waiting for us to bring them back home and for Hamas to let them go. So it is so critical that we keep them in our heart, even as we bring joy and happiness of seeing, you know, mothers and daughters reunited, families being brought back together, and a bit of joy after so much sadness. But the battle is far from over, unfortunately. We still have a very long way to go.
Our final question today is from Instagram. What do you expect to see during the next hostage release as it happens next week? Will we see the same scenes or might it look like something different?
You know, it's an important question. All I can say from my own perspective, again, having seen the last two hostage releases over the last 2 weeks, we've gone from fast to full-blown circus when it comes to Hamas's actions. We've seen armed Hamas gunmen standing on top of Red Cross vehicles, waving guns, waving AK-47s at hostages and Red Cross workers alike. We saw this farcical show of a sort of six-stage performance on Saturday when the 4 women were dressed up in these fake IDF uniforms, given lanyards and something that represented credentials as if this was some sort of official handover, and it wasn't in fact a sick, militant group trying to present that they have some modicum of power and control in this region at the expense of so many Gazan deaths and, of course, so many Israeli civilian deaths as well. You know, will this escalate even further next week? Who's to say? It seems that Hamas is on a trend of trying to present that they have some sort of power and credibility still. But it is important for us to all watch very closely what's happening there, for Israelis and the rest of the world to understand that Hamas hasn't been entirely destroyed. They most certainly haven't disarmed, and that if left to their own devices, they will regroup, regain, rebuild, redevelop, and we could be back in this same situation sooner than any of us hope. Hamas must be defeated in its entirety if we were to have any sort of peace and security for this region. All right, well, that is all we have time for. Thank you so much for tuning in. Of course, we'll be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. Israel time and 8 a.m. on the East Coast. And also, just to let everybody know, today at 5:30 p.m., we're going live on an X Space with Elon Levy, Daniel Rubenstein, and potentially others from our spokesperson team. We'll be talking all the latest updates. They'll be able to give you everything that I wasn't able to cover here today in an extensive conversation there on X Space. So please do make sure you tune in. But in the meantime, I've been Westropp Evans. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching. Drop a comment below. Don't forget to like, share, and hit subscribe to stay updated with our latest content. Until next time, stay informed and inspired. This is Dejobnik signing off.